3 Madiraju Ashok session, Complications in Cataract Surgery. I would now like to invite our esteemed chairs. I welcome Chairperson Dr. Madiraju Ashok, Co-Chairperson Dr. G. Bharat Kumar, and to moderate the session, I would like to invite Dr. Varun Malhotra. I would now hand over to Dr. Varun to please proceed with the speaker presentations. Over to you, Dr. Varun. Dr. Varun, can you hear us?
Hi. Thanks a lot, Diksha. A very warm welcome to all the delegates and to the faculty. I hereby...
Dr. Madiraju Ashok. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Saru.
Hi, sir. Hello. 1 minute. Right. So a very warm welcome and a very good afternoon to all the delegates and the faculty for this Madiraju Ashok Symposium on Complications in Cataract Surgery. Without wasting any more time, I would hereby like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Professor Mahipal Singh Sachdev, the Chairman and the Medical Director of the Center for Sight Group of Eye Hospitals. He's the immediate past president of the IOS, a mentor to many and undoubtedly one of the most celebrated phacosurgeons this country has seen. Very good afternoon, sir. I hereby invite you, and his topic is management of cataract with small pupil.
Thank you very much, Varun, and indeed, they have to allow me to screen. Yeah, I'm still not allowed to share the screen. Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Varun, and thank you very much, Telangana Ophthalmological Society, for having me here. Indeed, a pleasure always to be at Hyderabad or to any other place in Telangana or Andhra that I used to attend. I'll be talking about management of small pupil as regards cataract surgery. Now, when you are doing a phacoemulsification surgery or any cataract surgery, total visualization is something very, very important, because the surgery is not a blind procedure. It is actually a seeing procedure. And the chances of having complications obviously tend to increase if you are not able to see what you are doing. In a small pupil, obviously the view would be obstructed. And for having a full and a proper view, you will need to manage with this small pupil. Now, there are a wide range of choices which is there. The first and the foremost is that you need to diagnose that this pupil is small in the OPD, and you should try to take all the measures to try and dilate the pupil pre-operatively. Nowadays, also when you have a lot of IFIS or tamsulosin patients on tamsulosin, we would prefer to start them on atropine 3 days prior, which may or may not help, but it definitely reduces the incidence of the prolapse of the iris. Now you have to work with the, apart from the dilators, you have also to use the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drops, because this reduces the chances of pupillary miosis because of the release of the kinins or the prostaglandin, etc. Now, the other thing that you can do, the point number 2, is that you could use viscomydriasis with a heavy molecular weight like a Helon 5. The third thing could be a mechanical stretching of the pupil, which obviously disfigures the pupil, and or sphincterotomy can be done. Both these procedures would cause harm to the sphincter and would therefore lead to an irregular pupil at the end of the procedure. Peripupillary membranectomy is the other thing that you would wish to do. That is, that if there is a membrane which is causing the pupil to remain constricted, you need to remove that. And then you can look at iris hooks and rings, and these would be iris retractors and hooks. And then you can look at Malugin or the BX ring, etc. Now, let me go through all of them one by one. This is the stretch pupilloplasty. You can see in this particular case, high molecular weight OVD is also used. So you can see that there is a membrane which we are trying, the synechia we are breaking. And once you break these synechia, you will have a slightly more roundish pupil, as you can see in this particular case. And these synechia need to be broken without injuring the capsule. And now when you put the viscoelastic, it tends to dilate, and then you can use 2 Y manipulators, and then you can do a stretch pupilloplasty, and you can see that we will have a much bigger pupil than what you had when you started. And then you can go ahead and do your capsulorhexis and go ahead and do the surgery. I won't go through the entire surgical procedure, but this is one of the methodologies which you can use if you don't want to spend money and you want to do it fast and efficiently. Now, hooks and rings are the other things which is there. So you have these iris retractors or hooks, or you have anything which is like a ring. So these are the other things that you can look at. Now, iris hooks are essentially very cheap and they are available made indigenously, which are nylon hooks with a silastic sleeve. The interior chamber is deepened with a viscoelastic, and you have to symmetrically place these ports. Make these ports with the MVR knife, so you can have 2 hooks, 3 hooks, 4 hooks, 5 hooks. In IFIS, normally you want to put another hook from where the incision is so that the prolapse does not happen. And these are held with the suture tying forceps, and you introduce, and then you have the sleeve or the button that you have by which it can be placed in the proper place. So this is, you can see these are the hooks. So these are 2, these are 4. You can have these. You have to place it depending upon where you place it. You will have different shapes which are there of these particular hooks. The disadvantages are that the iris platform between the iris hooks, if you are improperly placed, they will tend to hook up the iris, and iris prolapse can happen even through improperly constructed side ports. If you are doing these iris hooks after doing the capsulotomy, be very careful that you have viscoelastic so that the capsule and the iris, there is a space, and you don't tear the anterior capsule while you are putting the hooks. You can have Descemet's membrane detachment, and again this can damage the sphincter, which can cause irregularity in the pupil later on. So you can see this, the pupil has come down on you during the surgery. We have injected viscoelastic, but even at this stage you can go ahead and put the rings. So you can see that these are the rings that are being put, and be sure that because it is stained with Prepan blue, we are not trying to actually hold the capsule. So that is something very, very important. So this is where we are. You can see this particular thing, and once you have these hooks in place, you can go ahead and do your surgery. Now the ring expanders could be several of them. We don't use much of them. They are very expensive and not easily available, which is the perfect pupil, the Morcher ring, the Graethers. But what is commonly used is the Malugan and the one made by dear Suven in India, which is the Bhattacharjee ring, which is there. The advantages of these rings are that they distribute the pressure or the force across the iris in a normal fashion. That means that it is all over. It prevents overstretching of the pupil that is often observed, which when the iris hooks were incorrectly placed, and the additional incisions are not required. Here we had 4 incisions, as I showed you. In this particular case, you can go through the same incision. The BX ring can even be put through a side port incision right at the beginning of the surgery, and they give you sufficient room for nucleus fragmentation. Now, Malugan ring was made by Boris Malugan out of Fedorov Institute. It is a square-shaped ring. 4 equidistant circular loops are there to capture the iris margin, and provides the round pupil as a result of an 8-point pupillary margin fixation, and comes in 2 sizes, 6.25 and 7 millimeter, and has no influence on the iris stability and the mid-peripheral iris. So this is the Malugan ring, as you can see, and this is how it is inserted. And then from the same injector system, you can remove it. Let me just show you a Malugan ring in a patient who has an anterior chamber lens, and there is a decompensation. This is a tough case, so we are planning a removal of the AC IOL along with a glued IOL and also a DSEC, and you will need to have good visualization. So you can see here that we are removing the anterior chamber lens. I'll just go forward. This is the removal of the lens. You can see it is stuck there because of the inflammation. And here we have the lens which has been removed. Once you have removed the lens, we go ahead and put the Malugan ring in this particular case. So this is the Malugan ring, which will give us an exposure, an adequate exposure, as you can see, with uniformity, so that we can go ahead and do a glued IOL. So this is something very, very important that you need in this particular case. And now we will go ahead, and you can see that the IOL is being inserted because it was a PMMA rigid lens. So even though we are putting a foldable lens, we are putting it through the larger incision without folding, because the lens that had to be explanted was through a larger incision. And you can see that we are exteriorizing the haptics in this particular case. So once the haptics have been exteriorized, as you can see, we will go ahead and bury the haptics into the sclera, and then we will remove the the Malyugin ring, which is there. And then we go ahead and put in the DSEC from the incision that has been created. And after that, you can see that this is the bubble that we are putting so that the DSEC lenticle sticks on. And this is the end of the surgery, and you can see how well the patient has behaved. And you can see this is where the hooks were. So you needed a good Malyugin ring, which is there. So the rings and hooks actually provide you a safety net, and the pupil expanding rings and iris hooks dilate and stabilize the iris during phacoemulsification in cases of non-dilating pupil and floppy iris. The rings and hooks also stabilize the capsule. So you can use actually the hooks, which are the capsular hooks, which allow us to stabilize the capsule. And let me just show you 2-3 videos on phacoemulsification when you are in femtolaser assisted with phacoemulsification. So you can see that this is the size of the capsulotomy, which can be adjusted as you work on the system, and you can have the sparing of the capsulotomy even in a small pupil. So you can go down to up to 3 to 4 millimeters in a femtolaser. But the point here is that you are actually making the capsulotomy small. So let us see a particular case, which was a case of angle closure glaucoma. As you can see, a subluxated lens, which is here, an iridotomy and iris atrophy, which is there in this particular case. And you can see that there is the subluxation, which you can note. Can you see the subluxation, the movement of the lens? And how do we manage this particular case with a femto? So what you can do in this particular case is that you can insert a Malyugin ring as well as inserted. And you can see that this is the subluxation, which is clearly seen in this particular case. And once you have the subluxation, which is clearly seen in this particular case, you can go ahead. This is the pupil. You can have it centered, and you can see that that is the nucleotomy, the capsulotomy that has happened, and the nucleotomy which is there. And you can go ahead and get a good outcome. So I'll just show you the OR view. So this is the OR view. You can see this is how the pupil was earlier. We are going in, putting the incision, putting good viscoelastic, which is there. And as you can see, the viscoelastic has been put. And in this particular case, this is the Malyugin ring, which is there. This is the Varion overlay, which you are seeing. This is the Malyugin ring. And just go fast forward because of paucity of time. You can see this is how the capsulotomy and the nucleotomy has been done. And one can go ahead with the surgery. I'll just show you in this particular case also that this is what we are doing in this surgery. And if you are seeing a lot of movement in this, as you can see that it is difficult to rotate and there is movement. So actually you can use the hooks as capsular hooks, though capsular hooks are slightly different, but we have used an iris hook in the case of this particular case to go ahead so that the surgery, and then we will put an endocapsular ring later and get the surgical procedure done in this particular case. And finally, this is the BX ring, which is the Suven Bhattacharjee ring, which you can see here. This is how he has modified it several times. It is one thickness of the Malyugin ring. And you can see in this particular case, this is how it is going in. And once you go in, this is going to stretch the pupil. You can take back the patient now once you have done the dilatation. And I will just show you that this is the femto procedure that is being done in this particular case again. And once the surgery is completed, you can remove the ring which is there. So the rings have an important role even in the femtolaser assisted procedure. So to sum up, please do the surgeries under adequate visualization, which can be done by the various methodologies I have told you. And cataract surgery is in a small pupil a challenge, especially in phacoemulsification and flax. And there are multiple methods which I have discussed in this 12-minute period that I have, which have been described to tackle this small pupil, ranging from mechanical intervention to sophisticated intraoperative devices. And the femtolaser can give you optical surgical results where you can have tailor-made CCC along with the pre-chopping of the nucleus with the femtolaser. However, no technique is foolproof, and you need to understand what the technique is, and a good surgical expertise provides that extra layer of safety so that your surgery can go on uneventfully. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful and comprehensive presentation on cataract in small pupil. Are there any questions for Dr. Mahipal? So exactly, I would like to ask you one small question, sir. Do you feel that the efficacy of the femto laser is a little lesser or compromised when you use them when there is visco already in the anterior chamber?
So there are two ways. Either you can remove the viscoelastic, wash it out, and put a suture just to be extra sure or extra cautious. Or if you are using with a viscoelastic, you will have to increase the energy by at least 50%. That's about it. Both work.
Sir, one question from Bharat Kumar, sir.
Yes, yes. Hi, how are you?
Sir, fine, sir. So
Yeah.
we are having plenty of nuclear cataracts with pseudo exfoliation, constricted people, where
Yes.
zonules also weak. In such cases, so which method is preferable to?
So I would, this is again a method where doing a capsulotomy with the least stretch is something very, very important. So I would prefer femto. Actually, 70% of my cases today of cataract I am doing as femto. So posterior polar cataract, pseudo exfoliation, traumatic cataract, subluxated cataracts, hard cataracts, these are my preferred ways where I push the patient to a femto laser. But what is important in pseudo exfoliation is that you need to put in a CTR. But despite that, I have at least 4 or 5 of my patients who have come back to me 10 years or 15 years or maybe even 20 years after I had done the surgery, even with the ring and the whole thing dislocated into the vitreous. So this is often a progressive thing, and you can have a total dislocation of the bag, IOL, CTR complex. So at times, if you can fix it to the sclera, that is fine. But otherwise, I would prefer the femto laser in these particular cases after putting a ring. At times, a 4.8 capsulotomy without any intervention or 4.5, I am also very happy with that. And we can extend the capsular axis subsequently also. There is very little or minimal pull on the pseudo on the granules or on the capsule with the femto laser, because it just cuts and there is no pull or counter traction that we have to apply while doing a capsulotomy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I would now like to move on and call Dr. Chitra Ramamurthy, Medical Director of the Eye Foundation Group of Eye Hospitals based in Coimbatore. Welcome, madam. A very good afternoon. And her talk is on intraoperative zonular instability.
A very good afternoon to one and all of you, especially to our moderator, Dr. Varun, and the Telangana Ophthalmic Society for this wonderful opportunity. It's always a treat to come back here and talk, be it in person or in a virtual state as it is now. Just 1 minute. So my due is to talk on subluxations and zonular dialysis in cataract surgery. It mandates that this is one complication in phacoemulsification wherein an algorithmic approach, 1 minute, not able to move, is needed. So you call it a subluxated lens when the lens is displaced from its normal position, but remains in its pupillary area. And you call it dislocated when it is completely displaced from the pupillary area, could be anteriorly dislocated or posteriorly dislocated. The next important point to visualize is the extent of zonular dialysis. What is the clock hour, whether it's mild, moderate, severe, or advanced, wherein we need to strategize how we are going to go about dealing with the subluxation. And we should also be cognizant of the fact that what we actually perceive, it's going to be definitely a greater damage when we actually start operating. So then the next step which comes in is to assess the degree of zonulopathy. First, understand what could be the pathophysiology, whether it's a progressive or a non-progressive, which would decide how conservative or how radical an approach is going to be. If we have decided on doing a lensectomy, we would do a limbal or a pars plana route, wherein we would again then look at an ACIOL rarely or an iris clip more commonly or an SFIOL. But if you're planning to conserve the capsular bag, then in an early stage, you could use a CTR, use iris or capsule retractors or a modified CTR or a CTS as the situation may indicate. Now, if you look at this, there is a loss of zonular counter traction, which becomes quite a challenge when you're creating a rhexis and the pseudo-elasticity of the capsule, and you need to get a centered rhexis, which becomes quite a challenge. So you need to use a highly retentive viscoelastic, which will flatten the dome of the anterior capsule and initiate the rhexis from the area of intact zonules, which is critical. And you could give counter traction with the help of capsule retractors and thus manage to complete your rhexis. However, as was alluded to, with the advantages of the femtosecond laser-assisted surgery, you do not have to depend on the counter resistance from the zonular support. But again, you wouldn't go in to use this when the lens is grossly subluxated or if it is a purely dilated pupil. When it comes to stabilization of the capsular bag, you could use a iris hook, which would give you the anteroposterior support, or a capsule retractor. You want an equatorial support, you would use a CTR, or you could combine it with an Ahmed segment. So these are the iris hooks and the capsule retractors. It goes without saying, using a capsular retractor definitely gives you a lot more mileage and a greater capsular support. So I'm going to run you through some videos to bring home my point as to how we would deal with zonular weakness in different stages at which you are confronted. Now here there's a fair amount of dialysis, more than 3 clock hours. So what I would do here is use capsule hooks. And as the cataract is quite dense, there's going to be more of manipulation. I would go into the side port and insert my CTR, ensuring that the CTR is well within the capsular fornices as I can perceive. Use my second instrument to dial that last segment of CTR and nudge it into the capsular fornix, and thus it has circularized the capsular bag and given the buttressing force which is needed. Now you can see there's hardly any epinucleus. It's a dense cataract. So I would burrow in and create a small trench and then attempt at the first chop. But then I realized that the chopping has been quite inadequate. You need to have your anterior chamber constantly deep and stable, and you need to have your, if with the modern Centurion, it ensures that the anterior chamber stability is retained. This allows you from the zonular getting more stressed and or increased dialysis, and then go in and bring a proper separation of the nuclear fragment. Now the advantage is, as long as the nuclear fragments are within the capsular bag, it keeps the capsular bag stretched. It goes without saying that in a subluxation, the posterior capsule is quite lax. There could be a tendency for the posterior capsule to come trampolining in the phacoprobe. But while these fragments are there, if you gently go ahead and do your chopping and ensure in a hard cataract that you completely separate the leathery attachments as you go on, rather than having a nucleus which is separated at the tips and the center base is intact. And then you start going, assessing each piece after piece, emulsify it, try to bring it into the supracapsular plane, rather not be within the capsule, because as more and more of these fragments are getting emulsified, more of the capsule is being exposed, and we need to bring down our phacoparameters, as we do not want any chance of a posterior capsule getting caught into the phaco probe and jeopardizing the entire plan. Now, this was a case on the femtocataract platform. The surgery has gone off pretty well, and it was so unnecessary to have created a iatrogenic dialysis by getting hold of the capsular fornix. So you don't have to get jittery. You just need to keep the infusion on, inject viscoelastic. And if you're brave enough, keeping in view the extent of dialysis is not increasing, you could actually tease out the cortex, because a CTR placed early on could be a challenge in getting the cortical fibers out. Then you could place your CTR, ensuring that it comes to properly overlie the area of zonular weakness, and further place the intraocular lens with the haptic stretching that area of zonular weakness. Now, this was a case which is a dense cataract, a moderate pupil, but there was some kind of tremulousness, and I decided to get these pieces into the supracapsular space and do a very careful phacoemulsification with not too much of variation in the anterior chamber and the fluidics, and get each of these pieces as they are being chopped. Now, somehow everything seemed to be going well, and it did not feel the need to put a CTR early on. And but I was constantly conscious of the fact that there was no vitreous coming in, and you can see the capsular bag is so lax. So there has not actually been a dialysis, but a very weak capsular bag. So I inflate it with viscoelastic. It was probably daring not to have put a CTR, but you could cautiously, very gently tease out the cortex using a tangential approach, and you keep it open in your mind that any point of time when you see that rhexis is getting decentered or there's some query of a dialysis, you could immediately place a CTR. But till this far, I have been able to completely tease out the cortex, although yes, it's a completely lax capsular bag. So it is how early or how late you would place your CTR is a decision you take on as you go on with the course of the surgery. And now with everything removed, now is when I would decide to place my CTR. In this particular instant, I was fairly lucky to have gotten with the way it had gone. However, everything has to be done with a very gentle parameters. And then I would go in and insert my CTR through the side port, and I follow all the steps which I had already mentioned. And now with the CTR in place, the posterior capsule is quite taut, as you can see. And then we go in and insert the intraocular lens. And if it is a 3-piece or a single piece, doesn't matter, because till the end of the case, you have a nice centered rhexis and there is no evidence of a zonular dialysis. Now, this is a case of a fairly dense cataract, and the very first CHOP, I noticed a zonular weakness. Was it pre-existent or was it induced by CHOP? And then there is this iris prolapse. There is that small PI. So it tells me that I'm dealing with a small eye. So I would not be daring here, and I would definitely ensure that my CTR goes in right at the first instant. And here I could have used a capsular hook, but I've placed an iris hook to give support to that area of zonular weakness and go about my routine phacoemulsification, doing my CHOPs, gently rotating. You need to have a mobile nucleus. So the right amount of hydrodissection is mandatory in these cases. Maybe not too much of phacoemulsification in the bag, but have the nuclear fragments well out of way. Of course, the CTR being in place would be a bit of a challenge, but the cortex has been entirely removed. So now the plan of action is to inject a 3-piece multifocal in this patient. So here, as you can see, that gently it's unfolded, and I'm going to position my haptic so that it stretches that area of zonular weakness. Now is the time to get the iris hook out. The case seems to be completely done with the viscoelastic being removed. And then as I do that, and as I try to reposition the iris, I notice that vitreous strand, which seemed to have escaped in through that area of zonular weakness. So I would do a focal vitrectomy, then push the vitreous back, ensure that the main wound is sutured, and the eye seems to be fairly all right the next day. So then, when would I use a capsular bag anchoring device? Now, if you look here, this is at least more than 4 clock hour of dialysis. It's mandatory that you get a centered rhexis so that the capsular bag is centered once it is supposed to the sclera. And here the plan is to use 3 capsular hooks so that it keeps it stretched, and the need to place a CTR right in the beginning is not indicated. And anyway, the plan of action was to use a Cioni ring. So I would inflate the bag and then position my Cioni ring such that the eyelet of the Cioni comes to overlie the area of maximum dialysis, then remove my CTR, then position the intraocular lens. And then this was an old video wherein a triangular scleral flap has been created and the rail loading technique is being done. And then it sutured to the scleral wall. And finally, the conjunctival flap is sutured and the conjunctiva overlying is also repositioned. What is the role of CTS? Essentially, the Ahmed capsular tension segments, it's a partial ring with a 5 millimeter radius of curvature and has holes in case you want to place an iris retractor or suture fixation. And if you look at this case, a Hoffman's pocket is being created, and you can see that there is a rhexis is now being created, and you would try to ensure that your circle rhexis is well away from the area of zonular stretch. You could plan on placing a CTR right away, but it was a fairly soft cataract. You should remember there could be a fluid misdirection in these cases. But however, I have delayed placement of the CTR, get the soft nucleus out of the way, And now I wouldn't delay positioning the CTR. Now, this is a case wherein you do not expect the dialysis to increase. It's a case where it's going to be practically non-progressive, but there could be an asymmetric back contracture. So you could err to place a CTS and position it and then suture it into the Hoffman's pocket, and you have a nice centered rhexis and an IOL in place. But then comes an extreme situation wherein there's severe subluxation. It was a case of a severe exfoliation and a scleral tunnel is being created, and you can see it's being fashioned. So the plan of action here is to place an iris clip IOL. So I make my incisions at the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock positions. And once this is done, I would remove the nucleus in the with the vectis, do a gentle anterior vitrectomy. The pupil is small, so there is no need to place a pilocarp in here. And then I would position my iris clip lens, position it horizontally, and hold it with my inclination forceps, and just tuck in that iris tissue into the between the haptics. And thus they're done in the other eye. But very rarely you could have a late post-operative IO bag dislocation where you would need your posterior segment surgeon to get you out with the bail out with a subluxated bag with the IOL being taken out, and then an SF IOL being planned. So essentially, I would like to conclude stating that if you have a methodical and algorithmic approach towards these subluxations, you could end up doing them as ideally as you would do a routine phacoemulsification with an optimal visual outcome at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chitra. It was a wonderful and comprehensive talk, especially those videos at the end. I would like to reserve any questions for the end since we are running a little late. I would quickly like to invite Dr. Partho Biswas, the Director of the BBI Foundation, Calcutta, for his talk on pre-existing posterior capsular rent. A very good afternoon, sir.
Thank you very much, Varun, and thanks to TOS for an excellent session that we are all enjoying. And what we do see is the amount of vibrancy in the webinars, which has actually transformed to the online meetings that we have today. Thank you very much, Varun, and I'll share my screen for the talk. Well, the pre-existing posterior capsular rent and how to optimize the management of this rent and give the patient an optimal vision. So how do we do it? So a posterior capsular rent means that things have fallen apart and we need to take cognizance of the fact that the placement of the lens becomes the most important thing in the possibility of a proper capsular bag. Now, when there is already a disruption of the posterior capsule, we need to ask the first and one question: is a posterior capsular rhexis possible with this situation? And at times, it is not possible. So here we are with a situation where the posterior capsular rhexis is absolutely not possible. There is a rupture of the posterior capsule, and we have a whole chunk of the nucleus. And what do we do? So here in this case, what we need to do is to use the high molecular weight viscoelastic to separate out, and it acts as a tool between the vitreous cavity and the nucleus. And you can go ahead and do a phacoemulsification with very, very low parameters, all the time keeping in view the strands of the viscoelastic that is there. And every time the strands are disappearing, you need to put in more viscoelastic, and thereby the vitreous disturbance is not there. Whenever you feel that the vitreous disturbance has come in, at that instant, you need to do vitrectomy. The vitreous in the anterior chamber has to be removed, and then the next procedure. So here we have not much of vitreous in the anterior chamber, and we place a 3-piece lens in the sulcus. So we'll go on to the next situation in which the 3-piece lens, in this situation, the 3-piece lens has worked quite well. And with all these 3-piece lenses, what we need to do is to capture it in the capsular bag, where the capturing itself is important so that the captured part stays stable. Here, of course, we need to see whether there is vitreous in the anterior chamber. Whatever vitreous is there needs to be taken out. A vitrectomy needs to be done before closure of the wound. And triamcinolone acetate is one very important tool for this. So next we come to see a situation where PCC is possible. And let us look at this situation. Here we have a situation in which we have completed nearly, and then we have a small posterior capsular rent, and very statistically significant, this rent is right in the center. So statistically significant because this can be converted into a posterior capsular rhexis, and this rhexis can become nice and round and circular. And if such has happened, this bag is now ready to be a bag which will be stable. So if it is possible, now here in this situation, you can put any lens inside the bag. It be a single piece lens or a multi-piece lens. So whatever is required, it can be placed very nicely into the bag, and it can be very stable. However, if you think that there could have been any amount of vitreous disturbance, the triamcinolone acetate is always important before closure of the wound. Let's look at this another situation, and here we have a situation where as you can see, it was a small pupil, and I've had a lot of trouble. You can see the iris popping out, and you can see that there is a good rhexis, anterior capsular rhexis, but there is vitreous disturbance, and I'm trying to make a posterior capsular rhexis through this. Now, in such a situation, it is quite important that there's already vitreous into the anterior chamber. Here is a situation where you have to clear off the vitreous from the anterior chamber, and the possibility of the vitreous base being undisturbed is very important. So once the vitreous from the anterior chamber is cleared off, then of course you can place the lens inside in the sulcus. Here we are using a 3-piece lens and capture it nicely. So once captured, these lenses stay stable, and you can see all those 5 hooks and which were used because of the small pupil. But again, if it is nicely complete and if it is nicely captured, you can see the ovalization of the anterior capsule, and of course triamcinolone acetate to do the vitrectomy. So let's look at another situation, and in such a situation, it is again a PCR which is occurred, and with this PCR, what you would see is we had planned a toric lens in this case. Now, can we do a toric lens in this case? And we already have a PCR, but again, the PCR is a small one, and I'm fashioning a rhexis in the posterior capsule for the PCR. And now that it is done, I am at least comfortable that possibly I'll be able to put in this toric lens. After that, I remove the amount of the cortical matter that there is, and you can see that there is a large nuclear fragment also, which I'm not disturbing immediately. So here is a situation where I'll remove the cortical matter. If at all any amount of vitreous comes into the anterior chamber, then I'll take the vitrector, which will work both for the vitreous as well as for the remnant cortical matter. So keeping that small fragment there itself, I'm going to place this single piece lens inside the bag, and this we will try and see that yes, it is well placed with its centration, and after having placed it in its axis, then of course the nuclear fragments can be removed. So here we have a stable situation and a stable bag, and we can be more or less sure that the bag stability will be maintained and the toricity also will be maintained. Let's look at another situation where the posterior capsular rupture has occurred, but can we place an intraocular lens in the bag even when there is a rupture, and this rupture is in such a condition this was a posterior polar cataract, and we had this rupture, and it's a transverse rupture, as you can see. So with such a transverse rupture, we are trying to place here. Of course, the PCC is not possible. And can we place in this transverse rupture an intraocular lens in the bag? So the bag is not there, but it's a hammock-shaped bag that is still existing. So can we place the haptics of this intraocular lens in those hammocks and have them nice and properly fixed in place? So just look at this video. It's not possible in every situation, but in certain situations, it definitely is possible. So we have released it, and now we are taking the haptic and twirling the haptic with the manipulator and placing it in between the anterior capsule and the tone posterior capsule. So it has to be done under full visualization. And again, same way, you can see the kink that has to be achieved. And here I'm using the single piece Acrisoft lens without any financial interest. These are one of the best lenses in such conditions because of the pliability of the haptic. And the haptic comes in very, very gently. And you can see that there's not much force being used, and we are able to place it in the bag. So once in the bag, one has to ensure the stability is there. The viscoelastic has to be very proper, high molecular weight viscoelastic to separate the tone posterior capsule and provide a space between the anterior capsule so that the placement of the intraocular lens can take place well. Now, here is another situation in which we have the same situation, and again, it's a posterior capsular rupture which has occurred, and with this, we are removing of the cortical matter. And again, this was a posterior polar cataract, and we knew that this is going to rupture. And despite all the measures taken, the posterior capsular rent is there. And with this posterior capsular rent, now it's a little different from the previous case, and you can see that it's a longitudinal rent here. So here again, we are separating the anterior capsule from the tone posterior capsule and placing the single piece lens again over the iris for the first time. And then once it is placed, we are not placing it in the bag at all. Now, once it is placed, we gradually rotate it and then find that small space between the anterior capsule and the tone posterior capsule. And then it has to stay in that place. So the maneuvers have to be very gentle and extremely appropriate so that it stays put. And anytime you feel that it has not got into the bag, so you need to take out these lenses. So again, as you can see that under direct visualization, the pupil has to be well dilated, otherwise this cannot be done. So these are a few techniques that is not possible for every case, but in many cases, it definitely becomes possible. So last of my videos is about this particular case that I'm going to show you. Yes, so this is a case of a one-eyed person again. And here we have a traumatic cataract. The trauma, as you can see, is a large scar on the cornea, and there was the lens was cataractous, and we knew that it was a sharp injury, and obviously the posterior capsule had also broken. So this patient came to us nearly after about 3 months. We waited till it was well settled. This is a surgery that's being done after nearly 5 months. And we are removing the amount of additions by the vitrector, because any amount of pushing or pulling with spatula, these things are not to be done. So no more harm to already this eye that has been harmed by the injury. So it has to be a very, very safe and a very quick surgery, as well as it has to be patiently done. And as we carry on, we can see that the posterior capsule is obviously torn, but the anterior capsule can be salvaged. And you can see that we have been able to salvage the anterior capsule, and there is anterior capsule there. So we place this intraocular lens in the sulcus, and once in the sulcus, it stays put. So and the stump that is still adherent, we remove it and just about 30 seconds more. And once it is removed, this stump is quite an obstinate stump, so we have to remove it by these thick scissors. And once removed, then the placement of the lens is ensured. It is very well centered. This patient from just about hand movement vision regained a vision of 624 N10. So 618 N10. And this is what, and these traumatic instances are definitely a fact of life, but we do believe that it is not a life sentence. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much, sir, for these wonderful videos. I'm sure this will encourage all us surgeons to be able to deal with these rents in a much better way and still be able to implant IOLs in the bag. I would, due to paucity of time, I would like to move on to the next talk. I would request everybody to please note down their questions, but I would take at the end of the session. I would now like to invite Dr. Arup Chakrabarti, Senior Surgeon at Amulya Jyoti Eye Foundation, Calcutta, and the Editor Proceedings of the IOS, for his talk on intraoperative complications related to the IOL implantation. A very warm welcome, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Visible? My slides are visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
So good afternoon, everybody. And I am not from Kolkata any longer. I have been in Trivandrum for the last 20 years in my Chakrabarti Eye Care Center. And I will be talking to you about complications related to intraocular lenses. Now, the good results of a cataract surgery can be ruined by an inappropriate IOL selection or inappropriate handling of an intraocular lens. Some of the situations we see the complications after the surgery is over. For example, inappropriate IOL power or wrong IOL that has been selected. But what I'm going to discuss with you right now is intraoperative complications due to intraocular lenses, and nothing financial here. Now, this particular patient was an IFES candidate. You see the limbal pupillary ratio is 58%. So definitely all precautions were taken. And I'm not going to show you the course of the surgery, but just the intraocular lens implantation. Just fast forward the video a little bit. Yeah. So I had decided to use a hydrophilic acrylic intraocular lens in this situation. So the incision size was about 2.8 millimeters. And mind you, the patient has become a little uncooperative. The anterior chamber is shallow. Iris has a tendency to prolapse. So I'm more bothered distally, what is happening to the distal part of the lens. And in the process, I didn't realize that the lens has got flipped. So now the situation is, do I flip this lens back into its proper orientation? I decided against doing it because the patient was uncooperative, anterior chamber was shallow, the iris had a tendency to prolapse, iris was prolapsing out from the incisions, and I did not want to have any much further manipulations. This particular lens is a hydrophilic acrylic lens, as I told you, and this is an Oroflex lens. Unfortunately for me, this is an equibiconvex. Anterior and posterior surface of the lenses are of equal convexity. It has a 0-degree angulation, and the only thing that will happen here, the posterior sharp edge will be anteriorly located. So I really do not expect any alteration in the postoperative vision in this patient because of the opposite orientation of the intraocular lens. And this is how the surgery ended. I look pretty okay. First post-op day, some amount of striate keratopathy was there. And this is the last visit, I think first post-operative day. This is the eye, and the vision was as expected with minus 0.5 diopter sphere. It was only 6.6. It was 6.6. So patient had done pretty well. Now, this is another patient where I had encountered a similar complication, but the management was a little different, where I flipped the lens into its proper orientation. So this is again the same type of lens, and pupil is well dilated. The rhexis is about 5 millimeters in size. So as the lens goes in, it again takes a somersault and it flips. And in the process, the lens is actually, it goes into the capsular bag, the trailing leading haptic, and the trailing haptic is in the anterior chamber. So here, of course, all the conditions are conducive for me to flip the lens back. So significant amount of a dispersive OVD is injected in both in front and behind the intraocular lens optic, and the lens was reversed. And this process, you have to ensure that the anterior chamber is pretty deep. The posterior capsule should be concave, and it goes on pretty well. And then the trailing haptic is dialed in. So this patient again had done well. And another common problem that we come across is a situation like this where you have a lot of small air bubbles during IOL implantation, and it is difficult to see what is happening exactly to the trailing haptic, particularly when you have a thick arcus endalis and a cornea that is not very clear. So here, the trailing haptic, it unfolds very gradually, and it takes a sweep against the corneal endothelium. So whenever you realize that such a thing is going to happen, it is important that you use your left-hand manipulator, a Sensky Hue, depress the trailing portion of the optic so that it is at a more posterior plane, and the unfolding of the trailing haptic occurs at a more posterior plane, and thereby preventing your cornea from getting damaged. Now, these are some of the cases which I have seen in our day-to-day practice over the last 20 years. This is a posterior chamber lens kept in the anterior chamber, which should never be done. Intraoperatively, nothing may happen because of the lens, but postoperatively, you'll have complications like secondary glaucoma, corneal decomposition, smoldering uveitis. The anterior chamber lens issues also I have noticed. Again, this is a flipped anterior chamber lens. It's kept ulta. This is an oversized lens. This is an anterior chamber lens where the haptics are kept in the sulcus. It is not kept in the tunnel. So, of course, surgical intervention is called for, and you have to change these lenses into an appropriate intraocular lens. Now, this is another patient I wanted to show you. So, this was a very well done phacoemulsification. The lens is being implanted. It is a 3-piece hydrophobic acrylic lens going in through the emerald cartridge. And since there was some difficulty in pushing the cartridge tip into the anterior chamber, OVD was re-injected into the anterior chamber, and the AC was deep, and leading haptic goes into the back. There is no problem whatsoever. Now, I would request you to watch the passage of the trailing haptic. As I try to dial it into the bag, at a particular moment, I could feel a snap. At this moment, there was a snap. And then nevertheless, I dialed the lens in, and the lens was well centered. Now let us see it in slow motion. Again, the trailing haptic, at this moment, there was a snap which I could feel it. And then nevertheless, dialed the lens and it went into the capsular bag. So at the conclusion of the surgery, I have a lens which is very well centered, but I know that there is some issue either with zonules in this area, or there is problem with the posterior capsule, which will be clearly seen after the irrigation aspiration when I use a higher zoom. As you see here, as I increase the higher zoom, and if you see here, you can make out, there is a line here. This is the nasal side, and this is the temporal side, and this is the posterior capsular rent. You see the posterior capsular margin here, and on the nasal side, there is absolutely nothing. There's no posterior capsule. But the lens was well centered, and I didn't want to do any further manipulations and left the eye as such. Post-operative day 1, the eye was very well centered, and same patient on the same day, on 1 week later, he had on the nasal side a large posterior capsular rent. You see the temporal margin here, but the lens is very well centered. I did an eye test for this patient and realized that there was a significant amount of higher order aberration in the entire eye, which is mainly coming from the lens. Cornea was okay. So I think this happens when the lens is not very well supported by the posterior capsule. There is some loss of equilibrium between the vitreous thrust in the area of the posterior surface covered by the posterior capsule and one that is not covered, where there's only anterior vitreous phase. So that can result in this kind of higher order aberrations, though patient was asymptomatic. This was my last case actually. So now this was a total cataract. Phaco went on extremely well. The leading haptic, if you see here, it comes out a little vertically. And I nevertheless persisted and implanted the lens into the anterior chamber. As I tried to dial the lens in, I realized the lens has got significantly decentered. So now it is a situation where I would not like to lose the lens. So after using adequate amount of dispersive OVD, both in front of the lens and behind the lens, I would like to bring the trailing haptic out of the eye. Now later, it's the same patient, why it happened exactly? So now the leading haptic comes out, it is vertical and it punctures the posterior capsule. And since I didn't realize it, it is the lens is still pushed medially towards the nasal side. So thereby the puncture wound has become a large incision and large opening, posterior capsular opening, and through that the lens is migrating into the posterior cavity, vitreous cavity. So this is something that could have been avoided perhaps if I had used a proper, handle the sensor lens properly. Sometimes it happens. I might have used thousands of these lenses over the last 25 years, but still I had this complication. So how did I manage it? So as I mentioned a little while ago, that I would like to get the trailing haptic out of the eye, because I would not like to lose the whole lens into the posterior segment. Then it becomes a case which goes out of my reach. It has to be done by the posterior segment surgeon. So that is done. So since the anterior capsular axis is since the anterior capsular axis was intact and it was about 5 millimeters and so I decided that I'll bring the entire lens into the anterior chamber. So you have the haptics in the anterior chamber, and then I'll tuck the haptics carefully under the iris into the ciliary sulcus. Same thing is done for the superior haptic. So I try not to dial it in, because when you use the tucking maneuver, there is greater control that you have as to where the haptic goes into the behind the iris. So you can rest assured that the lens is landing up in the ciliary sulcus, and this is now being locked in place by tapping the optic at multiple points, so that we achieve a buttonholing or posterior optic capture. So after so much of manipulations, I would like to know whether there was any vitreous in the anterior chamber or not. So I would stain with triamcinolone acetonide, and fortunately for me, I realized that there was vitreous face was not disturbed, because I had maintained anterior chamber depth. I had used a good dispersive OVD to protect the anterior vitreous face, and the patient had done well in the postoperative period. If you see here, there's a large posterior capsular rent on the nasal side, but still the IOL is well centered. So in summary, I'd like to say that, use a standard IOL and injector system, something that you're confident with. Don't try to experiment too much with newer IOLs and newer injector system that has come into the market. You have to ensure that the incision size matches the cartridge. Sometimes, we tend to have use an incision which is much smaller than what it should be, and then you end up tearing the incision. I have seen videos where the haptic and the lens has been implanted into the corneal stroma till it was too late. When it was realized and it was pulled out, you must inspect the IOL, the cartridge, and the injector for manufacturing defect. Sometimes even for the leading multinational companies, you may have a manufacturing defect. So when you discover that, this has to be replaced with a proper with another lens. And throughout the process of IOL implantation, when you load the intraocular lens into the cartridge, as the cartridge is loaded in the injector, as the lens moves through the cartridge and into the eye, till the last end, till the surgery is over, you must ensure that all steps of intraocular lens implantation has gone well. In certain situations, of course, for example, when you have a haptic that is badly damaged or an optic that is badly damaged, you need to consider an IOL exchange. So you need to have instrumentation for IOL exchange handy, ready with you. We normally ETO these sets, and whenever necessary, if an IOL has to be exchanged, that is done. I'm sure with these precautions, you will have lesser incidence of complications, intraoperative complications due to intraocular lenses. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arup, for this wonderful talk, and more so because we have just about completed the session in time. A very big thanks to all our speakers, Dr. Mahipal, Dr. Chitra, and Dr. Partho Biswas. I can already see the panelists for the next session in the hall. So back to you, Diksha.
Thanks, Dr. Varun. Very insightful and comprehensive talks by all our speakers, and fantastically moderated by Dr. Varun. Thanks to our chairpersons for chairing this session. With this, we conclude this session and move on to the next session.